So when I first opened up Going Medieval's default scenario, I saw the year and I started geeking out a little bit.
I'm a huge lover of history, and I especially love the Middle Ages.
So I thought I'd share what I found so special about the setting and 5 ways I think the developers could really take advantage of it. But first, let's talk a little bit about what Going Medieval is. Going Medieval is a colony simulator, a little bit like RimWorld. You start with 3 people whose stats you can randomize and a set number of resources in a randomly generated hill, mountain, or valley terrain for your map. And that's it. Build a village from only a few supplies and the wilderness around you. Occasionally, bandits or animals will attack. You can build gear or raid the bodies of your foes for armor and weapons. Eventually, you'll get to the point where the experience is very close to automated. There are a lot of colony sims, but most I've seen are very futuristic. This one stands out by having a historical setting. Now, the Middle Ages are uniformly badass, but if I were to go anywhere in a time machine, 1356 is it. Here's why. 10 years prior, the English faced off against the French at the Battle of Crécy.
So, the Battle of Crécy. I've got to get out of the way of the joggers. I can't be talking about the Battle of Crécy in front of the joggers. So, English at the top of the hill, 14,000 men. French at the bottom of the hill, 120,000 men. And the English win, and the way they win is with a brand new type of weapon, the longbow. It cuts straight through French armor and renders overnight the knight obsolete.
Which means that chivalry, the social order of the military upper class, was overturned. That same year, the plague arrived in an Italian port. It took about 5 years to travel across Europe all the way to England, where it wiped out between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population.
The thing about this post-plague period, this time immediately after the Black Death, is that anything could have happened. We often think of history as like set in stone, but this was a time when women were like leading siege defenses. This was a time when serfs who previously had 0 rights were renegotiating their salaries. And while it took some really awful events to make that happen, it's a reminder that things can change.
So, 1356, the time Going Medieval is set, is about 3 years after the plague had burnt itself out. And within a couple of generations, feudal lords would claw back the progress the serfs had made. So in a way, this game is set at the only time it could be set, which is incredibly cool. But does Going Medieval fully integrate this awesome setting into its gameplay? Not really. At least not yet. Going Medieval is still in alpha, and they have a lot of time to really tweak the gameplay. So I have 5 suggestions about how developers Foxy Voxel could integrate gameplay and the setting and make Going Medieval even more special. First, I think they should rebalance privacy. The game gives bonuses to building things like individual bedrooms, but that isn't how people lived in the Middle Ages. People lived and worked within the same buildings, and they didn't really have a great concept of individual property. People would come and go from their friends' and neighbors' houses without knocking, and might even sleep in their beds, and this wasn't unusual. I understand that the developers might want to incentivize building more difficult buildings and buildings that conform to what a modern audience understands a building to be. However, it's what tutorials are for. Second, there are stats within the game that suggest that eventually colonies will be able to raise livestock. Of course, there were farmers with barns, but it was also pretty typical for a family to own a pig or a goat or a cow, and for that livestock to live in the same building as everyone else, with all the wonderful smells that implies. Third, the aristocracy.
I know that in some ways the conceit of Going Medieval is that you're breaking away from the aristocracy, but I still think there are ways to incorporate them. For example, manors absolutely would have gone and retrieved wayward serfs, so it could be another kind of raid. Or maybe lords could be another kind of villager, one who doesn't contribute anything and uses all your resources.
Fourth, merchants. The Middle Ages saw an emergence of the merchant class. There's a map that shows villages nearby and which shows your relationship to them. And I think it would be really cool if you could trade goods with them, especially since past a certain point you have to really alter the map in ways you might not want to in order to get all the resources you want. 5. There are a couple of really interesting default scenarios, but I would like to see even more that take advantage of the setting. For instance, I made one myself about soldiers coming back from the 100 Years' War. Soldiers were paid in spoils, so I gave them a lot of gold and silver, and I gave them their own equipment, but otherwise, they don't have a lot on them. I didn't give them food, I didn't give them supplies. And I've had a lot of fun playing around with this scenario. I would love it if more like this came with the base game. More options for deeper roleplay that really take advantage of the setting would be great.
Like, subscribe, thanks to my patrons, and watch the next video.